Red Cloud's War, 1866 to 1868. Before the U.S. lost to superpowers or terrorists, it first lost to the Sioux. Red Cloud's War was fought between the United States Army and a coalition of Native American tribes, mainly the Oglala, Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho. The problem began when American settlers and miners pushed through the Powder River country of present-day Wyoming and Montana using a shortcut called the Bozeman Trail. That trail cut right through sacred hunting lands promised to the tribes in an earlier treaty. When the U.S. built military forts along it, Fort Reno, Fort Phil Kearny, and Fort C.F. Smith, the tribes saw it as an invasion. Chief Red Cloud refused to let it stand. He united the Plains tribes in a rare alliance and launched guerrilla attacks against the forts. The most famous battle, the Fetterman Fight of December 1866, saw 81 U.S. soldiers wiped out in an ambush. Not one survived. The U.S. sent more troops, but Red Cloud's fighters controlled the territory and outsmarted them in the snow and mountains. 2 years later, Washington gave up. The Treaty of Fort Laramie in 1868 ordered all the forts abandoned and the Bozeman Trail closed. The native tribes had forced the mighty U.S. Army to retreat, one of the few times in history that America truly lost and admitted it. Vietnam War, 1955 to 1975. The Vietnam War began as an effort to stop communism from spreading in Southeast Asia, and ended as America's longest, bloodiest embarrassment of the 20th century. After the French colonial army failed to hold Vietnam, the U.S. stepped in to back the South Vietnamese government against the Communist North, led by Ho Chi Minh. At first, it seemed winnable. The U.S. had money, planes, and more firepower than anyone. But Vietnam wasn't a conventional battlefield. It was dense jungle, guerrilla warfare, and an enemy that blended with the local population. More than 58,000 Americans died. Hundreds of thousands were wounded. The draft tore the nation apart. Television broadcast the war's horrors nightly, burning villages, crying children, body bags, and Americans began asking why they were even there. By 1973, public pressure forced a withdrawal. 2 years later, Saigon fell to the North Vietnamese, and the communists took control. It was a political and moral defeat. America had spent billions of dollars, destroyed its reputation abroad, and lost faith at home. Lebanon intervention, 1982 to 1984. After years of civil war in Lebanon, the U.S. joined a multinational peacekeeping mission to stabilize the region. But what began as a peace mission became a nightmare. U.S. Marines were stationed in Beirut to protect civilians, not to fight. But in the Middle East, neutrality is rarely neutral. On October 23, 1983, a suicide bomber drove a truck filled with explosives into the Marine barracks. The blast killed 241 American servicemen, the deadliest day for the Marines since World War II. President Ronald Reagan soon withdrew all U.S. forces. The mission had failed. Lebanon remained in chaos, and America's retreat was seen by militants as proof that the U.S. could be forced to back down through terror. It became a tragic lesson that military might cannot fix a political crisis without clear purpose. Afghanistan War, 2001 to 2021. The Afghanistan War began as revenge for the September 11th attacks and ended as a 20-year cycle of confusion, corruption, and fatigue. In October 2001, the U.S. invaded Afghanistan to destroy al-Qaeda and remove the Taliban from power. Within months, both goals seemed achieved. But then the mission expanded. Washington tried to rebuild Afghanistan into a democracy, a nation that had never been centralized, where warlords and tribal loyalties ran deeper than any flag. 2 decades later, after spending more than $2 trillion, training hundreds of thousands of Afghan soldiers, and losing over 2,400 American lives, the Taliban returned stronger than ever. When U.S. forces finally withdrew in August 2021, the Afghan government collapsed within days. Images of desperate civilians clinging to departing planes at Kabul airport shocked the world. After 20 years, the war ended exactly where it began, with the Taliban in power. It wasn't just a military loss. It was a collapse of purpose, trust, and credibility. The U.S. had fought the longest war in its history and lost to the very group it toppled 2 decades earlier. Iraq War, 2003 to 2011. Only 2 years after invading Afghanistan, the U.S. turned its sights to Iraq. The Bush administration claimed that Saddam Hussein was hiding weapons of mass destruction and posed an imminent threat. But those weapons were never found. The invasion began in March 2003. Baghdad fell within weeks. Saddam was captured, tried, and executed. For a brief moment, it looked like a decisive victory, until Iraq unraveled. The U.S. dismantled Saddam's army, leaving hundreds of thousands of trained, angry men unemployed, many of whom later joined insurgent groups. Sectarian violence exploded between Sunni and Shia factions. Car bombings, kidnappings, and assassinations became daily life. Then came ISIS, born in the chaos of post-invasion Iraq, which grew into a global terrorist network. By the time American troops left in 2011, more than 4,400 U.S. soldiers were dead, tens of thousands wounded, and Iraq itself was broken. The war that began to make the world safer had instead made it more unstable. No weapons of mass destruction, no lasting democracy, just endless blood and debt. Subscribe for more educational videos that bring history's hard truths to light.